I sold the house for $400,000, so I'm going to take my mistress and go on a trip. I was taken aback by Michael's inappropriately cheerful voice and blurted out, "What?" He's calling from the hospital, saying he sold the house for $400,000. What the heck is that about? That's the dear house I inherited from my dad. To boldly announce he has a mistress, that's sheer madness. What do you mean you've sold the house? What's going to happen to Sarah? When I mentioned my daughter's name, Michael just scoffed and said, "I don't care. She's been getting on my nerves, acting all high and mighty. Of course I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his daughter. I was so angry and shocked at the news of him selling the house and running off with his mistress that I thought I might lose my mind. I've got to somehow stop Michael. He can't just sell the house and hand it over that fast. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm a 39-year-old homemaker. I wish I could say that I live a contented life with my husband Michael, who's a year older than me, and our 9-year-old daughter Sarah. But the truth is, things with Michael are far from harmonious. Since we got married, Michael's personality has gradually warped, and I've suspected for about a year now that he might be cheating. I don't have any proof, so I haven't been able to do anything. But Michael doesn't seem to try very hard to hide his infidelity. Working in a factory for a parts manufacturer, Michael often goes out drinking somewhere 4 or 5 times a week after work. It's conceivable he's out with work buddies, but he didn't go out nearly as often until a year ago. Moreover, he comes home with a unique perfume scent or prepares expensive bags and shoes I've never seen before as gifts. Of course, he never gave them to me, but there were numerous times he took the gifts and left. I'm too scared to confront him with, "You're having an affair, aren't you?" So being the coward that I am, I still haven't been able to take any action. Until I can get solid proof of the cheating, the Michael I met back then seems like a completely different person. I met Michael 10 years ago, dated for a year, and then we got married. I was drawn to his kindness and sincerity, and before I knew it, I was the one in love. He proposed on our 1-year anniversary. We got married, and soon after, Sarah was born. To an outsider, it must have looked like a very happy marriage. And yet, I can't help but wonder how things ended up like this. It all started around the time Sarah turned 1. When Sarah became more active, rummaging through the house, parenting became even more challenging. As a full-time homemaker, I took care of Sarah all day, but sometimes I couldn't manage alone and started asking Michael to help with baths and meals after he finished work. At first, Michael, perhaps because he was conscious of his role as a father, cooperated with the child care as I asked. But as it became a daily routine, he gradually seemed to resent it and stopped trying to be involved in parenting. I've been thinking, this is your job, right? You're a stay-at-home mom, so you should be able to handle the parenting on your own. What does a tired man like me have to help out after work? Michael exploded with complaints, threw those harsh words at me, and left me and Sarah in the living room as he went straight to the bedroom alone. While I was dealing with Sarah's tantrums during her irritable infant and toddler period, struggling just to get her into pajamas without a meltdown, Michael's earlier words were still painfully lodged in my chest. After that, Michael completely withdrew from any interaction with Sarah. Even when she would ask him to play with her on his days off, saying, "Dad, let's play," he would respond without looking up from his horse racing magazine, "Playing is your mom's job. I'm busy." He never took Sarah's feelings into account. Whenever Sarah would cry out, Michael would harshly scold, "Hey, don't cry over something like this. What kind of parenting is Emily doing to think a stay-at-home mom can't handle childcare? That's just incompetent," glaring at both Sarah and me in turn. I didn't want Sarah to hear Michael's verbal abuse, so we would retreat to our room and end up playing just the two of us. There were moments when I longed to indulge in my hobbies, like reading or watching movies. But when you're living with Sarah around the clock, there's hardly any time for yourself. And yet, Michael gets to enjoy his horse racing hobby, and I'm the one who gets the brunt of his verbal abuse. It's so unfair, but I couldn't complain because our household depended on Michael's income. Without him, I wouldn't be able to feed Sarah on my own. I was also angry at myself for being so helpless. So that's how it was with Michael, disinterested in parenting and living as he pleased. 8 years have passed since then, and Sarah is now 9. Michael's abusive language has never stopped, and the King Michael I knew before our marriage is nowhere to be found. I lived with Michael, trying not to provoke him, simply to provide for Sarah. "Mom, you're so good at drawing. You should do it as a job one day." While Sarah and I were drawing together, she suddenly suggested that idea. "A job in drawing?" "Yeah, because I think your drawings are really kind and wonderful," she replied, laughing cheerfully as she looked at the animal illustrations I had drawn. I've always loved drawing, and at one point I even aspired to be a cartoonist. I realized halfway that it wasn't going to work out and gave up, but I still draw illustrations as a hobby. I always show your drawings to my friends, Hannah and Natalie, and they're amazed. They always say how lucky they are to have a mom who can draw such wonderful pictures. Despite her father Michael's cantankerous nature, Sarah has grown up to be honest and straightforward. Her sunny disposition is the complete opposite of my more introverted personality. It seems like she has a lot of friends at school and is even a favorite of her teacher. When Sarah complimented my drawings, it filled me with such pride. Knowing that Sarah has been paying attention to me also gave me a boost of confidence. "Thank you. That makes me happy," I said, and Sarah smiled like a blooming flower. As long as Sarah can smile, I feel like I can keep going with this life. That's what I quietly thought to myself. That night, as usual, Michael came home drunk, stumbling into the living room and collapsing as soon as he arrived. He was completely drunk. Michael's drinking has been getting out of hand lately, and it's becoming quite worrying. Sighing, I peeled the jacket off his slumped body and checked his pockets. What's this from a pocket that usually only holds keys? A piece of paper fell out, and I scrutinized it closely. It was clearly a receipt from a motel. This is definitely incriminating. I had only been suspecting infidelity in a vague sense until now, but here was the physical evidence. While trying to stifle the commotion in my heart, I quietly tucked the receipt away on a shelf. Then I began to ponder how to confront Michael. The next morning, still not fully sober, Michael left the house after Sarah had gone to school. I busied myself with the usual household chores, but I couldn't get the receipt from yesterday out of my mind. I had had my suspicions about Michael's infidelity, and it was my choice not to confront him without evidence. But with concrete evidence now in hand, it's hard to just look the other way and keep up the facade of a masked couple. I wanted to get him to admit to his affair and apologize within a week or even a few days. But how? As I was lost in thought, my smartphone started to vibrate. Who could it be at this hour? It was unusual to get a call during the daytime. Looking at the phone, it was an unfamiliar number. For some reason, a feeling of apprehension washed over me as I answered the phone. "Hello, is this Mrs. Johnson, Michael's wife?" "Yes, I am. Who's calling, please?" "This is from General Hospital. Actually, it's about Michael." The call was from the largest hospital in the area. The hospital informed me that Michael had been rushed there by ambulance. He was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. They explained further that his kidneys were likely to fail and that he would need a transplant. Overwhelmed by the sudden news, I was asked by the doctor, "Are you all right?" "Yes, but a kidney transplant is possible, right?" Yes, if we find a compatible donor quickly, we can perform the transplant. Being told suddenly that Michael needed a kidney transplant due to illness left my mind in a tangle. But the doctor continued to explain the details of the transplant surgery. Anyway, we will start by checking the compatibility of the candidates, so please cooperate with us. I only half understood what was being said, but it was clear that Michael was seriously ill. As much as he had mocked me or been unfaithful, I didn't wish for him to lose his life. If possible, I wanted him to be saved. That night, I spent the whole time thinking about Michael's transplant surgery. Weeks passed, and we found out the results of the potential kidney transplant candidates within the family. Astonishingly, I turned out to be the best match. Michael's parents were alive, but in poor health, and thus not suitable for the surgery. Since Michael was an only child and I was the healthiest and had the same blood type, it turned out that I was the most suitable donor. If asked whether I had any hesitations, it would be a lie to say I didn't. However, nothing could replace the value of Michael's life. With that in mind, I decided to go through with being the donor for Michael's kidney transplant. When I explained Michael's medical condition and our upcoming transplant surgery to Sarah, she said, "Got it. Do your best," and sent me off with her blessing. While I was hospitalized, Sarah stayed with my in-laws. Despite their poor health, they were well enough to stay at home without much trouble. Sarah was happy to go to her grandparents' house because she got along well with them. This should be fine for a while, I thought to myself, relieved that Sarah was such a good and understanding child. With that reassurance, I faced the transplant surgery. A week later, after signing the consent forms and undergoing the necessary health checks, I donated a kidney to Michael. The surgery was over more quickly than I'd expected, and I was hospitalized for about a week while Michael stayed for 10 days. Thankfully, there were no complications, and the recovery went smoothly. Then, the day before I was due to be discharged, I got another call on my phone. When I answered the phone, wondering who it could be this time, a familiar voice said, "It's me." The caller was none other than Michael. Thinking I might be thanked for becoming a donor, I asked, "It's been a while. How are you feeling after the surgery?" However, the words that came from the other end of the phone were completely unexpected. "It's about our house," Michael said, pausing for a breath. I was taken aback by the sudden shift to talking about the house. "I sold the house for $400,000, so I'm going to take my mistress and go on a trip." I was taken aback by Michael's inappropriately cheerful voice and blurted out, "What?" "He's calling from the hospital saying he sold the house for $400,000. "What does he mean?" "That house is the precious one I inherited from my father. And to brazenly declare he has a mistress, that's just insane. What do you mean you sold the house? What's going to happen to Sarah?" When I mentioned my daughter's name, Michael just scoffed and said, "I don't care. She's been getting on my nerves, acting all high and mighty. Of course I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his daughter. I was so angry and shocked at the news of him selling the house and running off with his mistress that I thought I might lose my mind. I've got to somehow stop Michael. He can't just sell the house and hand it over that fast. I've got to do something. Michael said, "I sold the house. I'm going on an overseas trip with my mistress." And then the call ended abruptly. With my mind in turmoil, I tried to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't believe that Michael had suddenly sold the house, especially while he was in the hospital. The shock worsened my condition, and my hospital stay was extended by a few days. In my distress, I felt helpless and lay on the bed, brooding over what to do next. I decided to call Sarah first. Without the house, Sarah, and I would have nowhere to go. I was angry that Michael had so boldly declared he had a mistress. But what worried me most was Sarah. I called my in-laws home, and my mother-in-law answered. My mother-in-law quickly handed the phone over to Sarah. "Hello, Sarah. I'm sorry. It looks like my hospital stay is going to be a bit longer. Are you okay? Aren't you feeling lonely? I heard Dad sold our house, so we don't have a place to go back to." Anxious about Sarah, I peppered her with questions in quick succession. Then Sarah responded with a bright voice, "Mom, it's okay. I've taken care of it." What confused me was Sarah's words about having taken care of it. I was left puzzled, tilting my head. "See, Dad told me he asked his mistress to sell our house. But actually, Grandma and Grandpa." Sarah meticulously explained to me what had happened during my hospitalization. Listening to Sarah's story, I was very surprised. It was because an unexpected turn of events had unfolded without my knowledge. "So don't worry, Mom. I'm fine. Thank you," I said, encouraged by Sarah's maturity. Finally feeling a bit of peace settling in, yet if what Sarah was saying was true, I wondered what was happening with Michael and his mistress at this moment. I was curious, but I told myself that rest was more important now and allowed myself to fall asleep. 3 days later, having recovered, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. "Mom, welcome back." Sarah came running over with a happy look at her face. Behind her, my mother-in-law was smiling gently, saying, "That's wonderful, and Michael, that man has really done something unbelievable." "Emily, I'm sorry," my father-in-law said, looking grim as he apologized to me. I wondered how Michael could turn out so twisted when he had such wonderful parents. "No, it's my fault for not speaking up sooner." "Well, Emily, there's something we need to tell you." "Yes, what is it?" I sat down in front of my in-laws with Sarah beside me, ready to listen to their story. I was surprised again by their tale, but my mother-in-law reassured me with firm encouragement. We won't let Michael have his way. After the conversation, Sarah and I attempted to head home. But on the way, I saw a familiar man and an unknown woman arguing with a realtor in front of his office. There was no mistaking it. It was Michael, and a woman next to him was undoubtedly his mistress. Michael was in sweatpants, his hair a mess, the mistress wearing a short skirt with only one high heel, her face bare. "Come on, do something about this. How can the house not be sold?" "Yeah, what about my $400,000? As I've said, the buyer canceled the purchase last night, so there is no contract anymore." "Why would they cancel? Damn it." Michael was stomping his feet in anger, with his mistress screeching beside him, drawing shocked looks from people passing by. Sarah and I were also surprised, but realizing this was about us, we approached them. "What are you doing here?" I asked Michael unexpectedly, making him and his mistress gasp in surprise when they saw me. "Oh, you! What are you doing here?" "Oh, I get it. You're the one who did it, right? You must have talked the buyer out of it." "What? That's ridiculous. What are you even talking about?" I was astonished by their baseless accusations and instinctively shielded Sarah behind me. Seeing the realtor's confusion, I stepped forward and said, "I'm his wife." The realtor replied with a dazed, "Oh, are you kidding me with this?" Cancelled because of this, we had to turn back right before boarding the plane, and now we can't buy a new house, and I still have debts from the money I spent on her. Michael was pointing at his mistress as he said this. Finally, I understood what Michael was up to. He was trying to sell the house to pay off the debts from money he spent on his mistress and to buy a new place for the two of them to live. He knew very well it was the precious house I had inherited from my father. How incredibly selfish to think he would ignore Sarah and me, and even attempt to take away my most important asset. It's unbelievable. I was shaking with anger. "Excuse me, but isn't it you who is being disrespectful? What are you doing showing up out of nowhere? You're talking back to me. You wouldn't even be able to eat if it weren't for me." Despite the critical situation, he was still spewing insults. Disgusting. With Michael, I continued speaking. "Do you really think you can sell my precious house without even discussing it with me? I'm the owner of that house. Did you forge the documents or something? And you've been badmouthing the buyer of the house. But do you realize that the people who were trying to buy it were your parents?" "Huh, what do you mean?" Guess what I had heard from Sarah over the phone while I was in the hospital was that my in-laws had pretended to buy my house as a strategy to discipline Michael. My in-laws had heard about all of Michael's misdeeds from Sarah and were furious, saying it was unbelievable that he would do such things to Emily and his good granddaughter. My in-laws believed Sarah over their son because of her inherent brightness and honest nature. I'll explain. Grandma and Grandpa knew about Dad and that woman, and they were really angry. I knew Dad was trying to sell the house, so I talked to them about it. That house is important because it's the one Mom's dad left to her, and they said it shouldn't be sold so easily. That's why they pretended to buy it before anyone else could. Sarah stepped forward and spoke confidently about the situation. "What are you doing to me, damn old man and woman? And you sticking your noses in shows what poor parenting you've had." Michael, desperate and defeated, let out a vulgar laugh. Sarah remained unfazed by Michael's attack. I, however, pulled out a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it under Michael's nose. "I want a divorce." Seeing the divorce papers, Michael snorted and scoffed once again. "Divorce? You said it. You're okay with divorcing. You think you can live without me." He seemed to think that as a homemaker, I would be lost without him. Perhaps that would have been true in the past, but now I had a plan. Determined to shatter Michael's foolish assumptions, I opened my mouth to speak. "You needn't worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents." "What, a lifetime gift? What's that, Michael?" And his mistress looked bewildered. In fact, this morning, my in-laws said they had something to discuss with me. And it turned out to be about a lifetime gift. My in-laws were in poor health, uncertain when they might collapse. They expressed a wish to give me a part of their assets before it was too late. Naturally, I initially refused. I suggested that such a gift should go to Michael instead. However, my in-laws said, "Emily, who has given us a lovely granddaughter, is more important to us than a son who can't even say thank you for an organ donation." With deep gratitude, I bowed my head and accepted the lifetime gift from my in-laws. "It's your father and mother's decision," they said. "They wanted to give it to me, not you." Michael's face turned pale. And no wonder. The assets that should have been his were now going to his wife from whom he was getting divorced. That's dirty. That's not right. It's normal for a child to inherit their parents' assets. I'll talk to them. Now, if they won't listen, I'll take it to court. Michael glared at me with furious eyes, shouting. I sighed at Michael's shallow thinking. It's about time, isn't it? Perhaps it's time to deliver the final blow. Stepping forward and closing the distance to Michael, I locked eyes with him and unleashed my words. "You're talking nonsense. This whole mess started because you belittled me and even took a mistress. It's your fault for spending all that money, right? Your parents made a completely justified decision, and do you even have the money to go to court? Even if you did, how do you think your past betrayals will look?" Michael squeaked out as if he was squeezing out a scream. Seeing me looking furious up close, I could tell he was shaking. "I'm sorry. I won't take it to court. Just forgive me. he was desperately apologizing. But it was too late. I glared at Michael again and delivered the final blow for insulting Sarah and me. I'll be taking every penny of the compensation for emotional distress and child support. If you can't pay, I'll chase you to the ends of the earth to collect. Be ready for it." Michael and his mistress screamed and ran away. The realtor, who had seen everything, said to me with a posture as if his back gave out, "Thank you so much." "No, I'm the one who should apologize for the trouble I've caused." Feeling uncomfortable staying there any longer, I took Sarah's hand, and we headed home. "Mom, that was so cool." "Thank you for standing up for me," Sarah said, even in such a situation. A smile was on Sarah's face. I vowed to myself to protect her for the rest of my life. Later on, I was able to divorce Michael without any issues. The long-suffering marriage ended so easily. It was anticlimactic. I even wondered why I had put up with everything until now. It seemed Michael really did pour money into his affair, and he had to borrow money from somewhere. His mistress left him, saying she couldn't be with such a poor man anymore. Misfortunes often come together, and Michael's company had to cut back on staff due to a decrease in sales from a shortage of materials. Michael, who worked in the factory, was one of the first to be laid off. It's an inconvenience for sure, but it's hard to believe he was laid off for no reason at all. Probably the company let go of those who were underperforming or had poor conduct first. Given how Michael used to strut around at home, it's likely he had the same attitude at work towards his subordinates. Now, having lost his job, his lover, and his wife, Michael is scraping by with part-time jobs. Lacking the energy to look for a new full-time job, he's settling into the routine of working and resting whenever he likes. Which must surely feel bleak, but there's no room for sympathy. I did what I could for Michael, even donating a part of my kidney to him. Despite that, he made a mockery of me, so it seems like karma has caught up with him. He should just focus on working hard to pay off his debts. As for me, I started doing illustration work, living off the assets I inherited from my in-laws. For a while, it was Sarah's compliment about my drawing skills that started it all. Orders are still few, but my clients say my work is meticulous and skillful. I plan to increase my clientele and work hard to raise Sarah properly.